The world of horror is famed for its villains, its monsters, its beasties, its otherworldly creatures, or simply a regular man or woman who likes to partake in a bit of the old ultra-violence. While some of these rogues are amongst the most famous characters in the genre, there are far too many great villains and monsters who, for whatever reason, maybe haven't had their flowers yet. Some of these may be hiding in some truly great films, those hidden gems that flew under the radar. Others may admittedly be trapped in a stinker. Yet that does not stop their own brilliance from shining through. So with that in mind then, I'm Andrew from What Culture Horror, and here are shocking horror movie villains and monsters you've never heard of. The Basement Dweller, Paranormal Activity, Next of Kin. It's crazy to think that there's now 7 Paranormal Activity movies, and while Next of Kin is one of the bigger name films on this video, it's one that not that many people have actually seen, especially when compared to previous entries in the franchise. And why is that? Well, the grim reality is that Next of Kin had its release delayed, and delayed, and delayed, eventually being quietly released to Paramount Plus in October 2021. Because, well, that would be because of the pandemic that had dominated the globe, including forcing cinemas to completely shut their doors during that period. As for the movie itself, yeah, Next of Kin is pretty rough, though it does have one brilliant basement-bound terror during the final act, where we get a tense traversal of the church's lower floor, complete with one gross-looking monster. This is one of those where you know you're about to see something, but you don't know when or what. Breaking the eerie silence here, it's the possessed Sarah, a ghoulish skeletal silhouette in a torchlight, eyes sunken, bluish skin, gangly limbs. The film itself may be a bit rough around the edges, but that visual is an absolute belter. Brent, One of Us. Released in 2017, One of Us has somewhat flown under the radar. In fact, it was a film that it took me until earlier this year to discover, stumbling across it on Tubi. But man, this is a fantastic, stylish horror based around a cult. From Blake Regal, One of Us centers around a journalist, Melanie, going undercover to join the Ascension family commune while she looks for her missing friend. An all-female commune, the group is led by the charming, persuasive Brent, played brilliantly by Derek Smith. With Melanie taking on the fake name of Mary, Brent puts her through the ringer psychologically and physically, but always in a calm, charismatic way. Basically, if Mary wants in, she has to do certain things to help this self-sufficient commune tick over, including one scene where she has to butcher a rabbit, because again, self-sufficient. Whatever the commune needs to get by, it's all done in-house, such as providing its own food sources, like that poor bunny. Again, Derek Smith is fantastic as Brent, a smooth talker, someone who just wants to think of the greater good. Only, of course, there's a little more going on, which spectacularly comes to the fore in the film's final act. The Blood Widow. 2014's Blood Widow is far from a perfect slasher movie, but it does at least offer something unique to the subgenre. Unique and totally badass. In terms of that unique, in a corner of horror so often dominated by male killers, Blood Widow delivers a female killer, complete with a fantastic character design and plenty of brutality. To set the stage here, Lovebird, Hugh and Laurie move to their dream house out in the middle of nowhere, right next to an old abandoned boarding school. And when their pals come over for a housewarming, the group get well-oiled and obviously decide to explore this old school, in turn putting themselves in the crosshairs of the Blood Widow, a clinical masked killer who's a former student of the school and nowadays calls it home. There's plenty of nasty gore here, a particularly rough leg break sequence, oof, yes. And while the Blood Widow is at times a sympathetic figure, the film doesn't go too deep down that path, instead making sure to present her as a twisted, sinister killer, and one who takes great delight in her work. The Pre-Iron Man, the Phantom of Regular Size. If this was simply a video about shocking monsters, obviously Tetsuo the Iron Man would clearly be right at home. I mean, having a fella turn into a part man, part machine who kills his girlfriend with his drill penis, that would do it, surely. However, we're trying to shine a light on some of horror's more obscure villains and monsters, which brings the Phantom of Regular Size into the spotlight. A short film designed as an experimental precursor to Tetsuo, this was Shinya Tsukamoto wanting to try out a few things, largely exploring the same general gist that we see in Tetsuo. Filmed in 8mm, The Phantom of regular size has a far grittier, less refined look to its metal-bound monsters than Tetsuo, and it's just pretty darn cool to be able to watch this short and compare it to the full feature. Even if some of the special effects, they don't exactly hold up all these years later, but that is to be expected. The Hunter, Last Girl Standing. The Hunter may only actually be in Benjamin R. Moody's Last Girl Standing for barely 5 minutes, but the impact he has on both Final Girl Cameron and the audience is a hugely important one. This is a movie that starts with a bang as we find a panicked, terrified man and woman in some woods at night as a masked killer is in the middle of their latest murder spree. We don't even get the fella's name, but the woman, that is Cameron, and that masked killer, he's known simply as the Hunter. And as the two try to come up with a plan for their escape, that unnamed bloke is fatally stabbed through his back, as Cameron is in a race for survival. We see the scene unraveling in real time, where we soon find several dead bodies tied to trees, one actually a live body tied to a tree, though they soon end up dead too, and Cameron is next on the hit list, as the Hunter stabs her and is on top of her, about to strike the final fatal blow. Only, the killer actually ends up impaled. Cameron, she does not waste her round and runs for her life to a main road where she's picked up by a passerby. Skipping ahead 4 years, the film changes pace somewhat, becoming a character study that shines a spotlight on the impact surviving such a traumatic event can have on someone. Cameron living a soulless, solitary existence, bouncing between her one-bedroom flat and her dull job at a local laundromat, all while seeing every stranger as a threat, every noise a sign of imminent danger. Last Girl Standing is phenomenal, smart, and just different, and the impact of the Hunter is something that stays with you long after the end credits. The Meteoric Monster, The Seed. Often, shocking horror monsters are shocking because they're so horrifying. Bloody, beastly, hulking beings, hauntingly eerie, you know the sorts. That's where The Seed is a little different, with its friendly-looking, slightly slimy little guy looking like a proper cutie. A proper cutie, of course, who lulls The Seed's protagonist into a false sense of security after it falls from the sky during a meteor shower, looking to our lead girls like nothing more than a wounded animal, crying until one of the group, Charlotte, takes pity and brings the alien inside, ultimately starting their downfall. You see, this little mite is able to absorb and hypnotize Charlotte's friends, causing them to develop their own monstrous qualities, vomiting black blood, bloating as if they're about to explode, all the good stuff. So this fella is quite the little rascal, quite the little fiend, and ominously, when the film's finale rains down even more meteors, you realise he was just one soldier in a mammoth army. The building is the monster, the Borderlands. While plenty of buildings look terrifying, it's not often you find one that has a living personality. So it's quite the surprise when you get to the end of British horror The Borderlands for the very first time, where you find out that the movie's central church building is the villain of the piece. When the Vatican sends a team out to investigate supposed supernatural activity in a 13th century church, it's discovered that a child sacrifice had taken place in order to appease a pagan deity. By the end of the film, two of our group find themselves in some murky underground tunnels, going deeper and deeper and deeper through this labyrinth-like maze until they get to a tiny passageway that's giving off a right old pong, a right old stink, a right old smell. And then, well, then it's revealed they're actually inside the digestive system of a living thing, with the walls firing off some enzymes and acid that dissolve the two. So yes, quite the twist to have a living, breathing, villainous church building as the villain of your film. The Stuff. The Stuff. On the surface, 1985's The Stuff is a bit of a tough sell. Basically, it revolves around killer yogurt. Still, this satirical horror is a little smarter than that basic premise. In terms of the plot, the world becomes obsessed with a new sweet dessert called, you guessed it, The Stuff, unaware that this delicious delight is actually a parasitic alien life form that mind controls its consumers. And because it's so darn tasty, people get increased urges to eat more of the stuff, which makes it easier for them to be brainwashed. In terms of creative tactics to seize control of humanity, this one's pretty creative, and the stuff basically has no real weak point, making it a properly deadly adversary. Like, how do you kill yogurt? Or yogurt for those over the pond. Ratma. VHS 94. Oh, Ratma, arguably the star of VHS 94, appearing in the storm drain story of this particular anthology. We're introduced to Ratma after a journalist and cameraman are abducted in the Sioux of Ohio. You see, Ratma is a half-man, half-rat who brainwashes people into worshipping him as their god, with Hail Ratma very much the mantra of the day. Oh, also, there's ominous black liquid that's vomited up by Ratma, and that just so happens to be capable of, essentially, melting people, pulling a smidge from Jeff Goldblum in The Fly, or the Xenomorphs of the Alien franchise. And let's face it, you have to respect a rat-like fella that's able to pretty much build an entire empire from the ground up. Hail Ratma, Hungry Beast, Terrorvision. In Terrorvision, Sherman Putterman's dad sets up a satellite dish so his family can watch private channels for free. But cause hey, who doesn't like a little cheeky freebie here and there? However, the family gets a little more than they bargained for when the dish picks up a signal from the planet Pluton, causing an alien called Hungry Beast to appear in their house. Not just that, but Sherman is the only person who can see this alien, so he's obviously ignored when he tells his family that a space monster is killing people. Terrorvision may be a fairly so-so film, but the Hungry Beast design is fantastic, with its slimy skin, asymmetrical body shape, bulbous eyes, and rows of serrated teeth. Hungry Beast also has a nice variety to how it kills people, from eating them to crushing their heads, or even filling someone full of acid. That'll do a job. Clement Dunn, The Centerfold Girls. From 1974, The Centerfold Girls is part slasher, part anthology movie, all revolving around Clement Dunn, a serial killer who stalks centerfold models. It's in the name. In terms of the anthology element, that's how the film is split into 3 separate stories involving 3 different victims of Clement's in 3 different locations at 3 different times. 3, it's the magic number. It's a unique way to frame a slasher, particularly with how different Clement's methods are in each segment. But what's most impressive about Clement Dunn is that this is no masked maniac, this is no crazed lunatic. Nope, this is someone who's eerily calm, extremely calculated, and it has to be said, immaculately dressed. Seriously, the dude rocks some fantastic suits and some properly swanky shoes here. Considering that the slasher boom didn't start until 4 years later in the aftermath of John Carpenter's iconic Halloween, that would be, The Centerfold Girls, much like Black Christmas that also released in 1974, features so many elements that would become a staple of this budding subgenre. Aunt Ethel. Halloween at Aunt Ethel's. While yes, we can all appreciate a deep, meaningful horror movie that makes you think and leaves you rocked for weeks on end, sometimes it's not always about elevated chin-stroking horror bitches, let's face it. Sometimes you need something a bit daft and dumb that doesn't take itself too seriously, and that very much is the case with Halloween at Aunt Ethel's, which quietly released in 2019. Here we have Aunt Ethel, an almost mythical figure in the local community, with urban legends and myths claiming that Ethel kills, cooks, and eats trick-or-treaters on Halloween night. And so we have a group of young adults who find themselves exploring all of this firsthand, with Ethel more than happy to embrace the rumours and rumblings that surround her. And as Ethel, Gail Yost is clearly having a lot of fun, man, fully leading into the film's more comedic moments. That said, Halloween at Aunt Ethel's shines brightest when it comes to its horror elements, with this somewhat of a hidden gem that's well worth spending a brisk 70 minutes on. Cankerman, Before I Wake. For its basic premise, Before I Wake focuses on Jesse and Mark as they adopt a young orphan known as Cody. As it happens, Cody has the ability to will his dreams into existence, which Jesse realizes could be used to recreate the couple's deceased son, Sean. Great news, right? Not entirely, as Jesse and Mark don't realize Cody has a recurring nightmare about a mysterious figure called, you guessed it, the Cankerman, who embodies Cody's subconscious fears, lashing out at anyone Cody thinks is out to harm him. And unbeknownst to Cody, the Cankerman at one point appears and kills a school bully, then does the same to Mark, and when Jesse lashes out at Cody for creating the Cankerman, that only intensifies the kiddo's insecurities, making the Cankerman even stronger. The Cankerman's skeletal design is creepy enough, but the concept itself is even more unsettling, of an innocent child conjuring up an evil force, not out of hate, but out of absolute fear and terror. Rusty Nail, Joyride. Also known as roadkill in some markets, 2001's Joyride finds brothers Fuller and Lewis on a road trip to pick up Lewis's crush Venner, when their radio picks up the signal of a trucker called Rusty Nail. In a pretty dick move, the broskies prank Rusty, setting him up for a hot date with the non-existent Candy Cane at a nearby hotel. As our jokesters listen from the next door room, Rusty instead finds an uptight businessman waiting for him, rather than the lovely Candy Cane. And that businessman, well, he ends up on the roadside, left in a coma and with his jaw ripped off. When Rusty later catches up to the brothers and rams their car, he says this is merely just a payback prank and leaves them to be. End of the story, end of the film, we all live happily ever after. What a fella. Of course, that is not the case. Rusty is far from done, kidnapping one of Venner's pals, then kidnapping Venner, setting up a trap at another motel, nearly killing every single one of them before vanishing into the night, only as the group gets seen to in an ambulance do they hear though, Rusty Nail is back on the CB radio, set for more chaos and carnage, as shown in Joyride's 2 sequels. The Snake Men. Monsters don't always have to be inherently bad per se, with a prime example being Frankenstein's monster, a product of his environment, of his unfortunate situation. Not really his fault, was it? Similarly, the Snake Men of which is fun to say, didn't have any real choice in becoming, well, snake men, being the victims of a crazed scientist who injected them with a serum that slowly turns them into snakes, their skin becoming scaly and pale, their mouths flat and wide. A little like Frankenstein's monster, there's something quite tragic about the snake men. Also, the one snake man that we see here is Dirk Benedict of Battlestar Galactica and the A-Team fame, and who does not love an appearance from the Faceman? The legless schoolgirl spirit, Teke Teke. When you think of the classic depiction of ghosts in something like Scooby-Doo, they float, the ghosts float. So with that logic, you'd think having no legs wouldn't be much of a hindrance for those spooky spectres, but that is where Teke Teke proves you wrong. Based on a real Japanese urban legend about a ghost girl missing the lower half of her body after being sliced in half by a train, the film slightly changes that backstory, actually to make it all even more grim in all honesty, but the basics, they remain the same. Office worker Hiromi is the vengeful spirit here, lurking near train stations and dark streets, waiting to claim the lives of those who come into her path and dare to turn to look at her, as Hiromi, or the Teke Teke as she's now known, hurtles her body along the ground towards a would-be victim. The 2009 movie even ups the stakes a little bit, ups the antes, adding in that if you survive one of these chases, you will die 3 years later. So yeah, you're basically screwed regardless. Miss Campbell. Eating Miss Campbell. Under the glorious banner of Troma, Eating Miss Campbell is a whole lot of fun, brutal, bloody, entertaining fun from My Bloody Banjo writer-director Liam Regan. Largely taking place in and around the delightfully named Henenlotter High, our central character here is Beth, a vegan goth fully aware that they are in a horror movie, and who keeps committing suicide in the hope of waking up in a rom-com, only, of course, to keep on waking up in a horror movie. As for that school, it's well known for its shootings, and its annual highlight is the all-you-can-eat massacre, where the winner can either go on their own murderous rampage or take their own life, with Beth hoping to win so that she can take the latter option. Yeah, this is a film that embraces the bad taste, safe to say, all in a stylish, darkly humorous and very bloody way. For Miss Campbell, she's Henenlotter's new English teacher, and not only does Beth have a crush on her, but the two end up in a relationship based around cannibalism, or more specifically, and here goes with the pronunciation, erectophonophilia, or lust murder, or sexual homicide, plenty of terms to throw at it. Basically, they get off on killing people and eating them. However, it's later revealed that not only is Miss Campbell in a cannibalistic cult, but she's in that same cult with Beth's family, with the intention for Beth to be next on the menu. Which, yeah, that was quite a heel turn swerve there. And as Miss Campbell, Layla Barlow is absolutely fantastic, delivering a style and snap to everything she does and says. But then, that could be said about the whole movie. For Eating Miss Campbell is so sleek and crisp in its execution, with its biting dialogue, and very bad taste dialogue for that matter, around every corner, offering from the brilliant Lindsay Crane as Beth. Plus, we've got some great mean girls here, the wonderfully named trio of Sabrina, Clarissa and Melissa, with it always great to see Terminal's Michaela Longdon pop up here as Melissa, not to mention appearances from genre fave Lawrence Harvey and of course, Uncle Lloydie, Lloyd Kaufman. It's a grand old time, and Miss Campbell is a grand old villainous character. The Brain. The Brain. The Brain centers around a mind-controlling alien that intends to take over the world. The same thing we do every night, Pinky. And obviously, The Brain wants to eat lots of people while they're at it. Being honest, the editing here is choppy, the pacing is slow, the characters are one-dimensional, and the acting makes the cast of Troll 2 look like Oscar nominees. Still, despite the done concept and rough execution, The Brain itself is a whole lot of fun, grinning at victims as it chases them, somewhat resembling Kang from the Turtles. Turtle power indeed. The Brain might not appear all that much in this film, but it makes one hell of an impression when it does show up, invading people's minds no less as it goes. Quite a skill. Grabbers. In Grabbers, inhabitants of the Aran Islands discover that the area has been invaded by aquatic aliens. Aquatic aliens with a craving for human flesh, because of course. However, when the locals discover that these aliens are allergic to alcohol, they realize that the only way to survive is to get drunk. As someone who enjoys the odd whiskey or two, that's absolutely a plan I can get on board with. Of course though, this solution also creates its own problems, as in the locals find it a tad tricky to coordinate an attack on these aliens due to being totally wasted. You may have guessed correctly that Grabbers, it does not take itself too seriously, but what is taken seriously is the design for the alien beasties. These blood-sucking rascals look fantastic, and more importantly, they look properly menacing, having the body of an octopus and the mouth of a leech, and they really would not look out of place in a more serious horror picture. Liak, Mystics in Bali. A 1981 Indonesian release, Mystics in Bali brings together elements from one of the most recognized creatures in the country's culture, the Liak. Opening things up, we see a woman, Kathy, transformed into a Liak by a wicked witch. During the day, Kathy seems fairly normal, but by night, her head, intestines, lungs, and spine detach from her body and float around the local area, preying on the blood of newborn babies. Mystics in Bali is full of surreal imagery from start to finish, but nothing is quite as bizarre as seeing a hovering head with its guts hanging out, scouting for babies no less. Sure, some of the visuals here, they may be dated, but the Liak still looks far better than you'd expect all these years later, and also because the film was made on a shoestring budget, so bravo, jobs are good. The Pretorius creature, From Beyond. Based on the Lovecraft short of the same name, Stuart Gordon's From Beyond reunites Gordon with Reanimator favourites Jeffrey Combs, Barbara Crampton, Bunny Summers, and of course, Carolyn Purdy Gordon, though it's Ted Sorrell playing Dr. Edward Pretorius here, a crazed scientist who builds a resonating machine that amplifies the user's pineal gland. Basically, it allows someone to tap into other realities. As is ever the case with these mad scientists, Pretorius' lust for power and knowledge leads to him using this machine on himself, and at full power no less, because why not? If you're gonna go hard, go hard. Well, a fairly solid argument against that though would be the fact that this machine turns Pretorius into a shape-shifting entity beyond human comprehension, all pulsating, wet, tentacle, gross, and obviously very Lovecraftian. And that's just Pretorius' first transformation, for he keeps evolving, taking on various freaky, phenomenal-looking forms. Some of these forms may only appear for a few seconds, but man, the practical effects in place for each of them are absolutely stunning, using a mixture of puppetry, animatronics, and stop motion. Yeah, From Beyond may be a smidge cheesy, but it boasts one of the most underrated movie monsters of all time, the Tunneler, the Puppet Master series. Out of this recording, there's a whopping 15 films in the Puppet Master franchise, including spin-offs, crossovers, and reboots, plus there's comics and even a free-to-play video game. Still, the franchise has never really cracked the mainstream, which is a shame, given how Puppet Master has plenty of great villains, especially the Tunneler. This evil doll has a power drill fused to his skull, allowing him to easily burrow through anything or anyone. He may be tiny, but man is the Tunneler effective, shredding ankles to pieces or taking advantage of anybody stupid enough to lie down around him. Not to mention how he kills Joey in The Curse of the Puppet Master, the 6th movie, where Joey is drilled in his, you know where, with that likely the most memorable kill of the entire franchise. Of course, even death wasn't enough to keep the Tunneler down, murdered and dissected in Puppet Master 2, only for his popularity to mean he was back in action by Puppet Master 3, Toulon's Revenge, and he's only missed 2 movies since. The Obsidian Butterfly, no one gets out alive. Loosely based on Adam Neville's novel of the same name, Netflix exclusive No One Gets Out Alive follows Amber, a Mexican immigrant who moves to Cleveland after the death of her mother, and who soon starts to have paranormal visions after being invited into a boarding house owned by brothers Red and Becca. Over time, Amber learns that Red has imprisoned an ancient god called the Obsidian Butterfly in a sacred box no less, giving power to those who commit sacrifices in the god's name. At one point, Becca ties Amber to the ritual slab, releasing the deity from its prison, and because the Obsidian Butterfly's introduction has been dragged out, it's got a fair bit to live up to. Considering the tiny box that's housed this god, it's a proper shock to the system when a 10-foot tall behemoth drags itself out, with a completely grotesque form. Every part of the butterfly is disturbing, be that her floppy skin, her backwards legs, the odd face that's not quite a face, and those cave-like wings. It is quite the sight, it is all kinds of disturbing, and you should well and truly go out your way to track this one down. The Beautiful Savior Killer. Killer body count. A Tubi original, Killer Body Count is an absolute blast. A slasher movie that finds teens sent to the Beautiful Savior Treatment Center when their families believe they're becoming too sexually active. And yes, this is of course a masked killer on the rampage here. In fact, I don't think the masked killer ever gets a formal name, hence why I'm just referring to them as the Beautiful Savior Killer here. And also because, yeah, I'd rather not spoil the killer reveal for you. I'm good like that. From director Danishka Esterhazy and writer Jessica Landry are in here is Cami, a girl who decided to get a little frisky at church, with her then deemed a sex addict by her strict religious father and sent back into the Beautiful Savior Treatment Center, where she's under the strict rule of stuffy counselor siblings Tawny and Eugene. We have plenty of themes of sexual awakening, sexual desires, and refreshingly, it's told more from the female perspective, all with plenty of religion good, desires bad tropes. Oh, and with some absolutely fantastic kills from our Beautiful Savior Killer, including one fella split right down the middle in a particularly gnarly scene. For a Tubi original, Killer Body Count is so well made, so well crafted, so well lit, with some brilliant performances, particularly from Cassiel Itok Winnock as Cammy. So yeah, absolutely get on this one. Elmer, Brain Damage. Who doesn't love a bit of Frank Henenlotter, right? While fans have a whole lot of love for the New Yorker's fantastic Frankenhooker, all the masses always get a kick out of his Basket Case trilogy and the antics of Belial and Dwayne, Brain Damage often flies a little under the radar. Released between the first two Basket Case pictures, Brain Damage centers on Brian, a fella who wakes up one morning to find an alien worm known as Elmer has burrowed into his neck, which, let's face it, is a pretty rough way to start your day if you're thinking about it. So much for a morning coffee, maybe a bit of bacon or sausage, catch up on the news, feed the cat. Nah, for Brian, his morning started with an alien in his neck. Not great, mate. Even worse, Elmer needs brains to survive, so it urges Brian to kill people and eat their brains, which is something he initially refuses because, yeah, cannibalism is obviously not cool. Being a crafty little so-and-so though, Elmer has a trick up its sleeve. Pump Brian's mind with euphoric chemicals, cause him to get addicted to that feeling, and then you make Brian eager to do anything to experience those highs again. Subtle this one is not, but we get to explore the effects of enabling, of codependence, and then of withdrawal. And because Elmer relies on his host physically, emotionally, and chemically, it makes it a more interesting antagonist than your typical alien. Then there's also the unique voice of Elmer, speaking in a posh and friendly dialect, making it sound like Elmer cares for Brian, even though, yeah, nah, he's just totally using him for their brains. Horace Pinker. Shocker. One of Wes Craven's more underseen, underappreciated pictures, 1989 Shocker sees Horace Pinker, played by a great Mitch Pileggi, convicted for over 30 murders and sent to the electric chair. However, thanks to a deal he's made with the devil conveniently, the chair does not kill him, but instead, it gives Horace the powers to summon electricity and possess others. Rather than just take the low-hanging fruit and blast everyone with electricity though, Horace gets pretty inventive here, to be fair. At one point, he mind jumps into a cop and uses that cop to shoot passers-by. Another time, he takes control of a driver and makes him ram into a truck, killing all passengers. I don't know why I sound so cheery about that. Also, Horace can take any form, meaning even we, the viewers at times, have no idea who Horace is until it's too late. Plus, much like another Craven creation, that'd be Freddy Krueger, Horace has a great bunch of one-liners to boot. Don Burnside, the Clove Hitch Killer. 2018's The Clove Hitch Killer takes place in a small town that's still reeling from a murder spree that happened a decade ago. A murder spree that resulted in 10 women bound, assaulted and killed. After discovering explicit photos in his father's truck, Tyler Burnside is horrified to learn that his dad Don is the infamous Clove Hitch Killer. You see, Don is an adoring husband, a devout Christian, and a beloved figure in the local community, being the last person anyone would expect. For Tyler, he's conflicted. Give up his old man and ruin not just his family's reputation, but also tarnish the town's reputation, or remain silent all the while knowing that your dad is a creepy old murderer. Writer Christopher Ford and director Duncan Scales do such a great job in terms of how Don is written and presented, and Dylan McDermott puts in a career-best performance, making the character so eerily memorable. The voice, the physical mannerisms, his general demeanor, all so different to Don's public persona, to the point it feels like McDermott is playing two different characters, making it all the more chilling when Don switches personality in a heartbeat. And if anything, Don is possibly even scarier in his Family Man guise, as you still sat there waiting for the veil to drop. Lola Stone, The Loved Ones. Oh, young love, isn't it sweet? That first kiss, that first relationship, obviously that first "it's not you, it's me" talk, all the good stuff. In 2009's The Loved Ones, though, we see a rather skewed love story. A love story that features lobotomy, amongst other things. Here we have Lola Stone, a troubled young girl who does not handle rejection well. In fact, so much so, when Brett turns down Lola's invitation to the school formal, because he has a girlfriend as well, Brett soon ends up knocked out, waking up tied to a chair and surrounded by Lola and her dad, Eric, with their house done up to mimic that same sort of school party. Oh, and also sat on the table with Brent, Lola, and Eric is Bright Eyes, a lobotomized woman who we'd eventually discover is Lola's mother and Eric's wife. What follows is Lola injecting Brent's voice box with bleach to ruin his vocal cords, his feet are nailed to the floor, with some knives no less. Brent's shown pictures of a bunch of Lola's previous victims, that's always fun. He's then branded in the chest with Lola's initials, salt thrown into that wound, and there's a smidge of implied incest between Lola and her old man. And that's all just the basics of Lola's unhinged behaviour. The Loved Ones, it is quite the trip, man. The Prophet, Dark Match. From Wolf Cop creator Lowell Dean, Dark Match released earlier this year, and it's a cracking film that nicely blends a couple of my personal favourite things. Yeah, that would be horror and professional wrestling. To be specific, it's a horror movie that happens to have wrestling as its backdrop. Set in 1988 and seeing the small-town Canadian wrestling promotion SAW booked for a lucrative event in the middle of nowhere. While the wrestlers are treated like royalty upon their arrival, things soon take an eerie turn when it's revealed that their hosts are actually a cult. A cult led by a former SAW wrestler no less. That would be The Prophet, as played by pro wrestling royalty Chris Jericho. These wrestlers are then forced to fight to the death in very literal death matches, all as part of the Prophet's plan to provide a sacrifice to a higher power. And it is great. It is really a whole lot of fun. Seriously, just a really fun, brutally violent movie full of plenty of heart too at times. And for The Prophet, Jericho, often known for his loud and over-the-top wrestling persona in more recent years, delivers a brilliantly reserved, unnerving performance, at least initially, before things, they do properly kick off towards the end. So yes, if you like your horror with a side, a smidge of pro wrestling, absolutely go and track down Dark Match, now streaming on Shudder. The Demon, The Wailing. In The Wailing, residents of an isolated Korean town are infected with a mysterious disease that causes them to act violently. Police officer Jung-gu discovers that this disease may be tied to a demon, but then, he decides to look for a more logical explanation than just, it's a demon thing. That is, though, until he has a run-in with a red-eyed monster that convinces him that, this disease is indeed otherworldly and supernatural. And he then meets a bunch of strange figures, from shamans to spirits, but due to their cryptic demeanors, Jung-gu can't be totally sure whether these figures are there to help him or if they're working against him. As for the demon, while it rarely appears throughout the film, and its identity isn't revealed until the final moments, its presence can be felt in every frame of The Wailing. And since the film relies on misdirection and gives conflicting interpretations of the unraveling story, you're left guessing who the demon is. Even though next to nothing is revealed, the demon still manages to get under your skin in the most delightfully disturbing of ways. And that's what we're all here for at the end of the day.